welcome back, everybody. This is the first we've been able to do since last year. But thank goodness your restrictions are getting less severe. You can do it. So I am at Domaine Michel Lafarge, and here we have three members of the family. We have Clothilde here in blue. Nice to meet you. We have her sister Eleanor.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And we have their father Frederic, who many of you I think will know.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So, and we've also got a lineup. We're going to join you for the first 6 or 7 wines, and after that, leave you in peace. So don't hesitate to stop and ask questions at any time. But maybe first up, I know that many of you are familiar with the Domaine because I've drunk the wines with you in Hong Kong and other places. But maybe if Frederic would like to start with a small presentation of the family Domaine, the original Lafarge, then Michel, yourself, your children.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Frederic Lafarge. The Domaine Lafarge was created in 1800, and during all the period, the Domaine bought a new parcel very with regularity. And my great-grandfather sold a lot of wine in barrel and many clients directly. And my grandfather began to bottle his wine with the vintage 34, and he sold at the client in France and Switzerland. And my father, Michel, began to work at the Domaine in 50, and since 59, all the wine, all the vintage was selling directly in bottle in the Domaine. And my father grew naturally in the 60s, the 70, and my first vintage, the Domaine, is 78. And we began the biodynamic method in 97, and we grow in the biodynamic method all the Domain since 2000.
So that means that the first vintage we're going to taste in 2017 was collectively between Michel and Frederic Lafarge. Michel, it was his 67th vintage, and Fred, it was his 39th. So together they made 106 vintages, which is not bad. And now Clothilde has been with the team since this year?
2018.
Okay. And what have you brought with you?
My smile. No, that's why I came back in 2018 after a few experiences in Burgundy and abroad. Maybe the big change I did was to introduce the horse in the vineyard, like my grandfather used it when he was young. And we use the horse in Caillerets since 2018, so no more tractor and no machine in this area. And since 2021, we plow the half of the Clos du Chateau des Ducs by horse to make an experimentation and to see the difference between horse and tractor. So really interesting to do it.
And at least one vintage you actually brought the grapes in by horse from the Clos du Chateau, did you? Is that 2017? Or
yeah, we do it every year. Every year. Yeah.
16.
16 is the first year.
Yeah, and we do it every year now in all the vineyards.
Okay. So just before we start, just before we start tasting, maybe a couple of words from either Frederic or Clothilde on your principles in the winemaking.
About the winemaking, it's quite really simple. For us, the biggest word is in the vineyard. We make wine in the vineyard. I mean, when we have beautiful grapes, healthy grapes with a good balance, with acidity and tannin during harvest, after the vinification is always easy. So we distem 100% of our wine. After it's natural yeast, vinify in wooden tank and concrete tank, it depends the cuvée. Usually the alcoholic fermentation takes 15 days. And after that, it's in barrel for 18 months. Quite simple. No. We don't use too much product, only a little bit of SO2, but that's it, just to protect the wine. crois que les tout libre, mais quoi d'autre?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we can talk.
And for 20 or 17, 18, for the premier cru, 15% of Euro.
Ah oui, we use a little bit of New York just for our premier cru.
And we aging during 18 months, and we don't, it's not fining and not filtration in the red.
So I think you've got your first wine served, and we are also now going to try the first one. So there's a pair then between the Cru du Chateau des Ducs and the Cru des Chênes, which are the two best-known vineyards of the domain.
So we choose Chateau des Ducs.
And as it says on the bottle, monopole, because it's almost the back garden here. In fact, from the window just off to my left,
Exactly.
I can see, it doesn't look like a horse, that looks like a tractor.
Ah oui, oui, non, mais papa, c'est le trait, parce que le tracteur, il ne va pas être utilisé. C'est parce qu'on n'a plus de place pour le garer sur le
parce qu'on a fini les mises en bouteille, on va finir aujourd'hui parce qu'il
Right, the tractor's not doing any work, it's just been kicked out of home because there's no room while they complete the bottling. So what about 2017 as a vintage? In general terms, it's a very accessible year that you can drink soon. In fact, the aromatics of this in a half bottle suggest to me that it's good to drink now.
It's a very good, charming vintage with a very good balance and early vintage. We began the harvest the 1st of September. Yeah. And it's a rich but a very good balance with silky tannin, very elegant, and it's a very good now, and they have a very good potential.
Yes. So the yield's a little bit higher than recent years.
Yeah. And since 16, we distem by hand the Cru Les
So for the Clos du Château des Ducs monopole, since 2016, we distem this cuvée all by hand, like the traditional way of work before the machine. So, comment on dit, c'est une clé en osier?
In a willow clay.
They have what's effectively a grid that goes across the top of the wooden fermenting vats. Mm-hmm. And it's made out of willows or reeds or something along those lines. And it's a lattice work. So you put the bunches of grapes on top of it, and then with your hands, you shuffle grapes over it. And what happens, the effect of doing that, is that the grapes fall down into the vat, and the stems remain on the top. And it happens very, very quickly, in fact. It doesn't take nearly as long as you might expect. And it's much more efficient, and it leaves the grapes pretty much whole.
Yeah, and for the wine, the purity, the intensity is best, and the wine are more energy.
Yes, I have absolutely no doubt that the Clos du Château des Ducs had a leap forward in quality when they started using this technique. And coupled with that, at the end of the fermentation, the solids are then pressed with a vertical press, and that's new, isn't it?
Yes.
Also.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a modern vertical press, but effectively it does the job that a press would have done 100 years ago. So these two returns to the old ways, I think, have had a significant effect on quality. On est d'accord?
Oui, on est d'accord.
And my great-grandfather, distant by hand all his wine since the end of the 19th century to the middle of the 30th.
Mm. So no one has ever used a whole cluster, a whole bunch yet? No. Okay, maybe we're just going to taste next to it the Clos des Chênes, and then maybe we'll get an idea from the difference of the two vineyards. And then we'll ask you your thoughts. You've got a full bottle, so your wine should be twice as good as ours. The noses are quite similar. There's a little bit more depth of fruit, I find, a little bit more in the raspberry style. In the So, Clothilde, when you're working in the two vineyards, it's characteristic for each of them. What does it feel like to be in the Clos du Chateau?
C'est dur comme question.
How you conceive the terroir.
C'est plus précis.
Ouais.
We began actually the Volnay in Clos du Château des Ducs because it's a very good, the best moment because Château des Ducs is early than a tradition for all the.
And it's early because you have all the buildings around it.
Yes, very protected way into the employee of the wall.
Yeah.
It's all on the same level.
Because there is a horse now.
Yeah.
No, both are really nice vineyards. Really lucky. But in terms of taste, usually the Chateau des Ducs is more. The tannins are more delicate and smooth, and usually the Clos des Chênes is more have more complexity and more structure. A little bit more masculine, but in the good way. The tannins are more present usually.
And I would add, normally there is more depth of fruit.
Voilà, c'est ça, ouais, plus de profondeur. Ouais.
Okay, so if we talk about Clos des Chênes, 150 years ago, it was not a famous vineyard. Dr. Laval didn't give it a top rating.
Because it depends. The collection, you have two types of collection. You have the little part between the road and the little street. It's a very red soil, very great collection. And the other part, either in the collection, is more white soil, and it's a collection with more austerity.
So you're in.
He explains this classement for Laval, and,
yes.
Because you have two types of soil in the collection.
So if he had just given a classification for the lower part, he would have given a higher classification. Yeah. It's also true that things were colder then, and being at the top of the hill maybe meant that you didn't get such good ripeness. So where exactly is your plot? In the best part? Obviously.
In the best part, you have the first parcel in Clos des Chênes after the tapier. And in front of the parcel, we have the Chambon Caillerets Champagne. Well, just in the cross of the four.
Okay.
En fait, on est entre la départementale et le chemin.
Okay. So if you look on a map afterwards, you can see the main road was the N73, now the D973, and there in the little bit that's just above that, the first section after you leave Tapier, which abuts the village itself, and just above, both above Champagne and above Caillerets. So it really is a crossroads of four very good vineyards.
Also very good.
And since then, Clos des Chênes has had a reputation. Lafarge has started making such good wines. Clos des Chênes has now developed a special reputation. But if you're not in the right part, you probably can't make wine as good as this. If you're not Lafarge's, you probably can't make wine as good as this.
The Clos des Chênes seems a bit at that level. My question was actually, with these two vineyards, particularly, how do you see the development kind of over 10, 20 years? How long do you normally feel you should wait to get that next level of development?
Okay, so for this vintage or in general terms across vintages?
Perhaps in general for these two vineyards.
Okay. So what do you think is the aging potential for the two vineyards? Not necessarily in this year, but in general, is there a difference?
It's the same potential for aging.
Yes.
And together, a few years ago with my father, we drank Cru du Château des Ducs 1915, and it's a fabulous wine.
Not just your father, but me as well.
Yes. And the potential, but it's possible to drink, to taste Cru du Château des Ducs before Clos des Chênes. 1, 2, 3 years.
Because the Clos du Château des Ducs usually is open more easily than the Clos des Chênes.
Yeah.
But you can keep it, it depends of you, 10, 20, 50 years.
So Frederic's just mentioned an occasion when a group of us had dinner here. It was a very, very social occasion, but it was decided to open some good bottles. And Frederic was opening the bottles, and it was Michel Lafarge's 90th birthday. And imagine somebody aged 90, and the bottle is put in front of him, and a huge smile on his face. And he said, "That's one of my grandfather's wines." And it was 1915, Clos du Château des Ducs, which was just extraordinary. Anyway, I just think you should show your hands to the group, because this is what a vigneron's hands should look like. Can you see?
Finished bottling.
Vintage 2020, just racking and bottling.
So it's a dark vintage, we can say. Okay. Either that or he's a coal miner, one or the other. Great. Frankly, for me, I would have no difficulty in keeping either wine for a long time, but I would be drinking the Clos du Chateau des Ducs in a lighter year at 10 years old, and then 15 or 20 for the rest. And the Clos de Chênes, I'd be really happy if I could keep it for more than 20. So anything in the 90s is drinking very well. 1 or 2 years will go on getting better. And going back through the 80s and 70s, I don't remember one of your wines which I felt had got too old. I can't, even a lighter vintage, I can't remember drinking one where I thought, oh dear, we should have drunk it earlier.
J'arrive. Tu bois tes vins et tu lui manges sur le déboire.
No.
We have one 2016, so we're going to try that. You probably already got it, enjoying it happily. We are going to finish the wines that we've got with the 2010, so prepare for when we finish these glasses. Any questions you want to ask about the earlier vintages you'll be tasting? So 2016, disaster for volume because of the frost.
Very little frost at the end of April, but the quality is very good. It's a very classic vintage. Yeah.
Yes, we were surprised because we were expecting it to be so difficult after the frost. And indeed, even quite late on, even in August, all the vineyards appeared to be aging or ripening at a different rate. But then suddenly, they all started to change color together, all the grapes. And at the end, the ripeness was relatively even in reds, less so in white, but it was even in reds. And we discovered this really fresh acidity in the wines, as well as the concentration of fruit. So you'll see that there is a little more color.
And we are the second period of September, the 22 of September. But it's later than 15 or 17.
Sure. But what used to be a standard timing.
On retrouve le côté, la structure ample du.
You pick up the structure and the weight of Clos des Chênes, and there is greater intensity of fruit in 16 and 17, but also I find the 16 a little bit more rugged, and I certainly wouldn't be drinking this now. If need be on a restaurant list, I'd pull out of those 17s without the difficulty, but the 16 I prefer to put away for at least 5 years from now. But I think it's recognizably the same animal as the 17 Clos des Chênes, but just with extra volume, extra intensity. Okay. And alongside that, we have a full bottle to join you. No halves made of this. Of the Caillerets, which we'll get Clothilde to talk about because bits have been recently replanted in a very special way. So you remember the old dictum from the 17th century that if you want to understand Volnay, you have to have Caillerets.
That's right.
And in most of the villages of the Côte de Beaune which have Caillerets, Chassagne, Puligny, and Volnay, then it's pretty much their #1 premier cru, or right up there, close to the top. So tell us about your Caillerets.
So Les Caillerets, it's a really small vineyard for us. It's only 0.3 hectares. So since 2018, it's all worked by horse and by us, by hand. So it's a lot of work. And since in 2020, we replanted the half of the parcel in a really original way. We planted in a spiral to try a new experience. And currently, it's quite interesting to see because each vine has a different exposition. So it's still work by hours. And it's quite beautiful and funny at the same time.
And for the energy is different. And we in JMIB work with the vortex, and then all the nature is never right. And we so it's very natural for the horse, and the energy in the place is very different.
Okay, so you harness the helix, harness the power of the snail.
Oui, c'est Maya. Oui, vas-y. And we,
like in the Maya civilization, they are more like this in a spiral or circular construction. So it's
a very interesting.
We will see the first harvest for the spiral vineyard will be in 2023, so in 1 year. So we will see if the grapes taste differently or not.
So normally people talk about my vineyard is north-south or east-west, and I have one side that gets hotter and one side that doesn't see the sun. But you have a complete mix.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the Caillerets give away a lot of minerality in the wine.
Yes, but you will get that minerality, however you grow the grapes, you'll get that minerality. Yeah. And as well as having a horse in the vineyards, do you have any other animals in the vineyards?
We have also some chicken, only in the Cru du Chateau des Ducs vineyard. Which is.
And the reason you have chickens?
We have chickens since 2004 to bring some biodiversity. Comment c'était pour les moches,
ouais.
And they eat the little bugs, the caterpillars and things like that.
So chicken and horse. That's it for today. We will see after.
And we have very good egg of Premier Cru.
Oh yes, Premier Cru. Hen's eggs. I get quite a different bouquet on this wine compared to its friend from Clothilde. It's more elegant.
More elegant, exactly. Right.
Yes.
The tension is very good.
I want to eat any chickens. Huh? Are they eating any chickens? Oh.
Chickens in the same wine. We did that once. We keep hens as well, and we had a cockerel who was making a nuisance of itself. The cockerel had been nicknamed Clive after a certain wine writer friend of ours. And one day, just been attacked once too often and said, "Right, that's it, Clive, you're meat." So she went in the middle of the night and pulled Clive off his perch and strangled his neck. And our neighbour cooked Clive au vin instead of coq au vin the next day. And he had this recipe that starts, take 6 bottles of Chambertin for cooking your coq au vin. So in fact, he used Charme Chambertin from Denis Bachelet rather than full Chambertin, maybe only 4 bottles rather than 6. But we had the most wonderful coq au vin we've ever had. And we rang up Clive, the real Clive, in the middle of this and told him that we killed him and we're eating him. It's very cruel of us, but still.
Jasper, one question. You mentioned that 16 has a vintage with frost.
Yes.
Are frosted vintages, is there a certain characteristic that you can tell? Because when you taste the 17 and the 16 side by side, they are very notably different vintage styles. But I'm very curious because you mentioned frost on 16, and we've heard a lot of frost in recent vintages.
Yes.
Does it have an effect on the wine?
It does have an effect on the following year because you normally get a really big crop set the year after the frost to compensate. So if you think about frost years in Burgundy, you have 81 followed by a very big crop in 82, 91 followed by a big crop in 92, 98 followed by 99, same pattern, 2016 followed by 2017. So
21, so
followed by 2022, yes. There should be some.
Normally after this.
I don't think, however, that you can probably, I mean, except that the frost years tend to be undervalued. Nobody really talked about or rated 91 at the time. And yet, subsequently, in Burgundy, the 91's really good. It was a bit of a struggle in Bordeaux.
Yeah. Quick question, Jasper. Like, I think Mike's right. They're very different style. Is that because partly 17 just ready because it's more open, sort of lighter style, whereas the 16 is more packed? It's a bit restrained both on the nose, on the palate. Just needs more time. Certainly, it's packed with fruit at the back end, but it's not yet, as the English say, unfurred, right?
No, I would go along with that. I think that the 17 is very typical of 17. The 16 is more classic young wine from Lafarge. So at 5, 6, 7 years old, around the time of these wines, I'm expecting something more like 16 than 17 as typical. Okay, any more questions from the floor before we just have 1:15 to look at, which is the Pitures, which is a vineyard that we got recently. Any more on the first 4 wines? All good?
I don't know what other people think, but the Clos des Chênes just has a kind of elegance, but also a not power exactly, but richness that really eclipses the Clos des Ducs in 17, I would say. And while the Caillerets on the nose is really attractive, I think on the palate, again, the Clos des Chênes 16 is kind of a notch above just in terms of quality because of that elegance, that richness, and that kind of follow through that the wine has. But maybe other people have different views.
I don't have a different view, Richard. I'm entirely different. But also, it's one of those things, we've also got it now locked into our brains that Clos des Chênes is sort of the special reference, Lafarge Clos des Chênes. And Clos du Château des Ducs has come up a long way since the sort of the change in techniques. And now, I think, what you serve in the cellar, you nowadays serve Caillerets, then Clos des Chênes, then Clos du Château des Ducs. Is that the order?
As order for tasting, usually it's Caillerets, Clos des Chênes, and Clos du Château des Ducs at the end. Since we distem by hand there.
Yeah. But the 17 was not distem by hand, was it? Or was it?
See, it was. Since 16, all the vintage.
Right.
16. And the
Okay. Let's try the Pitures, which is only available in the marketplace in Magnum. I have kept back a few half bottles for tasting purposes. So a half bottle, and you have a Magnum. Which was the first vintage of Pitures for you? This is the very first vintage.
Yeah, because before 2015, the Pitures was blended with our Volnay Les Mitans, and it was just a blend Volnay Premier Cru. And since 15, we separate Pitures and Miton. So 15 is the first vintage. Only in Magnum, and Les Pitures is one of the first Climat Volnay before Pomard. It's located after Clos des Ducs from Marquis-d'Angerville. And for us, the Magnum is really the perfect size for Les Pitures because this one has a really huge complexity and a lot of tannin. This wine usually needs sometimes before.
Yes. So you have the Clos des Ducs, which comes down the hillside at quite a slope, and then right next door you have Pitures that starts maybe a little higher on the slope, goes all the way down. It's slightly wavy. It's not an absolutely even slope all the way down. You probably you won't be able to see. I don't think enough. But you can check when you get back home, or you may have the app on your phone. Yeah. So there are actually two vineyards now, Pitures and Chênes, which are both called Pitures.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they used to be separate, but now they're both Pitures. The next door, Thomas, you have Pitures.
that's right.
And the reason that you are allowed to split out Pitures from Miton, is it simply a subset, or?
We separate because we had, a few years ago, we had the opportunity to buy a second parcel of Les Mitans. So it was big enough to make a cuvée. So we decided to make Miton, and after it will be Pitures separate. It's always nice to separate the climate because Miton and Pitures are, they were really nice together, but they are completely different in terms of taste and localization. So we decided to separate because we like to put the terroir.
Just to complete answering the question, no, they're not a subset. So that's why previously it had to be labeled just as Volnay Premier Cru.
When you was yes.
Chênes and Pitures are Chênes is a subset within Pitures, and Ormeaux is a subset within Miton.
Ah oui.
They like making life as complicated as they possibly can, these Burgundians. N'est-ce pas?
Très bien, oui,
I think you pick up immediately on the so this is a rather more austere style of wine, very structured, quite mineral.
Yeah, how is it? I never open my mouth of Les Pitures, so I will be happy to have your feedback because it's young, I think, 15 for Les Pitures.
I was going to say it's quite a. I mean, rugged sounds like a negative comment, but it's not meant to be. It's kind of a rugged style of wine. Is that the vintage or is that the vineyard? You think, or a bit of a combination? Robust, as Chris says.
Rugged,
robust.
Robuste.
C'est à peu près les bons.
It's a vineyard.
Ah si, c'est toujours très robuste. En plus, en magasin, c'est très jeune. Ah, pardon. Yeah, I think, il a dit robuste, comment dire en anglais?
He said rugged.
Ah oui. Yeah, but it's really, I think, specific to the Pitures because it's really like this. It's a blend of Volnay and we are close to Pomard, so it's really sometimes rustic, but 2015 in Magnum, it's still really young for Volnay Les Pitures.
So, what's the soil color in your bath? Is it very red or very white soil?
It's red soil.
That's what I thought. So it means a lot of iron oxide in it, which is giving some of that more rugged character.
That's a nice.
But in Magnum, you've got to be 15 years away from touching that.
Yeah, usually yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to be MC?
Yeah. And I think it'll make quite a contrast to the Miton, with which it used to be in partnership, because that is lower on the slope. It tends to be much softer and rounder style of wine, but we haven't got that. They have no more bottles left here at the Domaine. So you'll have to taste that without us and tell us how it's working. But obviously 2010 is just a really lovely vintage. They're quite a late one. Do you remember that harvest date?
No, I don't remember. Maybe September.
Yes, it would be in
I
September.
think so. I mean, like normal vintage compared to now.
Yeah.
Wow, spicy.
So how's the Miton 2010 going down?
Delicious.
Spicy note.
Yep. Before your time, Clothilde, it's not your...
No, it's time is always good.
Yeah.
It's like the really good vintage now, 9, 10, it's open now. But which is quite nice with our Miton. In all of our premier cru of Volnay, Les Mitans is always the wine you can drink even when it's young. You can open Les Mitans with 4 or 5 years of aging, and it's really enjoyable and drinkable compared to Cru des Chênes or Caillerets.
Yeah.
Of course, he aged really well, but it's really open even when it's young. So it's quite nice in our lineup of Volnay Premier Cru. Because Les Mitans is always really classic Volnay, really elegant and easy to drink.
Very hard.
Cru Les Pitures is young vines.
Les Pitures is 35, 38 years old.
Okay. Not young, okay.
Ah oui, for us it's young, 35 years old. No, it's not so young. It's 35, 38.
Okay.
Oui, it's young compared to Cru des Chênes or Chateau des Ducs. But
I was just wondering why in 2010 then you had Miton on its own rather than being Premier Cru.
The first vintage of Les Mitans, it was 2005. So from 2005 to 2011, the label Volnay Premier Cru is already just Les Pitures, but
okay. But you didn't put
no, because in 2005 we bought some new vineyards that there was a lot of new cuvées for us. Bonne Premier Cru Clos des Aigros in Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, Volnay Les Mitans. So we wait a few years before to put Les Pitures on the label. So 05 for Les Mitans, and yeah. So if you see some Volnay Premier Cru from 05 to 11, it's already just Les Pitures, but we didn't change the label at this time because not too much change for our customers in one row. We need to.
You probably had some labels.
And after in 12, 13, 14, we don't produce a lot in Les Pitures. So.
Also, you noticed in Burgundy, the reason why Burgundy tends to have the neck label with the vintage on, unlike in an area like Bordeaux where the vintage is on the main label, is because they have many different wines in any one vintage, and they don't have much of any of them, so they get a lot of labels printed up with the Vineyard name on, and then they just add the relevant vintage.
Yeah, it's easier for us for labeling. Yeah. In terms of logistics, it's easier to manage it.
Okay, so the Miton is drinking very well now, a little bit spicy, you say, and just very smooth and enjoyable otherwise. Okay, so alongside it, the last of the 2010s is the Clos du Chateau des Ducs. Yeah, I'm finding the 2010 Clos du Chateau des Ducs, the color is a little lighter, and as soon as you put your nose into it, you think, oh, okay, that's going there. We can drink this.
Jasper, how big is the Miton vineyard? The production or the vineyard size?
In Miton, we have 0.4 hectares.
Okay. Oh. And the Clos du Chateau des Ducs, I think, is 1 hectare?
No, 0.6.
Okay.
1 hectare for Clos des Chênes.
Okay, Clos des Chênes is 1 hectare. Clos du Chateau des Ducs, 60 hours, 0.6. Miton 0.4. Yeah. Pitures hardly anything.
0.3 for Les Caillerets, and Pitures is 0.15. This is the smallest one.
So, I don't know how long it lasted in your mouth and how long this is, but in our half bottle, the length of flavour in this 2010 Clos du Chateau des Ducs is really impressive.
Yeah.
Actually, even the Miton.
More than the Miton?
More than the Miton. Well, the Miton also has your soup. It's great.
At least as long. Right. Do you have any questions on the wines we've had so far? Maybe also we could get words from the Lafarges about the other vineyards outside Volnay that we haven't tried today. And then also if you have questions, anything you'd like to know about the vintages you have still to taste. But firstly, is there anything arising out of the wines thus far tasted?
They're so wonderful. Where can we buy more? I recommend the vineyard.
Not easy. Who sells your wine in Hong Kong?
Pearl of Burgundy.
Yes, Pearl of Burgundy.
And,
Pearl of Burgundy.
Ouais, so
okay, so next is the vineyards that there are two cuvées of village Volnay, sort of a regular, and what they call the vendange sélectionné, which is the vineyards close to the premier cru.
That's right, exactly.
And there are two red vineyards in Beaune, Premier Cru Grève, and Beaune Clos Les Caillerets, and there's a really nice white from the Clos Les Caillerets as well. And the funny thing is, Domaine Lafarge and Domaine de Monti bought new vineyards in Beaune-Aigres at the same time, and neither knew that the other one was buying it. So they both came out very proud. Look, we got this new vineyard. I said, yeah, I know all about it. And there's a tiny bit of Pommard. I mean, really a maximum a barrel in a good year.
Yeah, 15 hours.
So Pommard Pézerolles. And there's a little bit of Meursault, and there's wonderful generic wines. Aligoté, especially the Raisin Doré. A Passe du Grain, which appears in various different ways, but at least two ways, if not three. And the Bourgogne Rouge, of course.
Yes.
Which I'm currently drinking the 2012 at home, which is just in a nice place. Have we forgotten anything? Any other vineyards? C'est tout? Au niveau des vignes, c'est tout?
Ben oui, c'est tout.
Oh, there's also, there is or was, a red Meursault, which was sold as Côte de Beaune Village.
Oui. On l'a pas fait depuis un moment.
Que les belles années sur la vigne.
So that covers the vineyards, and after this you have a 2005, which I imagine will still be very powerful. One of the 2002s apparently was not in perfect condition, but it's a lovely vintage. Should be just right now. 2000, 99, 98, 97, 96, 91 and 90. So we wish we were with you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would think of those. 97 should be very nice now. 2000 should be very nice now. 99, 98, 96, still more to come later.
Very good now.
Very good also, but still. But
the younger is 99.
99, yes. Okay. And one of these vintages, but we won't say which one, is Clothilde here, n'est-ce pas?
No.
No.
92 is not here.
Ah, je crois que c'était. You haven't got Clothilde here, never mind.
90 and 91 are really good.
And you haven't got Frederic's here, and you certainly haven't got my year. But in fact, my year and Frederic are only one apart. Yeah. Yeah. But probably Michael will have at home Michel Lafarge's year, which is 1928. I'm sure he's got plenty to be around to share.
Yeah.
Max. Before we let the Lafarges get back to their vineyards, do you have any questions about the wines to come, or anything else you'd like to share or us to share now?
Could the Lafarges give a bit of commentary about their Lafarge Vial project? And also, Clothilde has a great Instagram with a tremendous number of old bottles that she's been tasting. Would love to hear a little bit about how the 62 how those have been tasting, because those make us all very envious.
Thank you so much. Lafarge Vial my parents started this project in 2014. They were interested by the Beaujolais, and they had a great opportunity to buy a building and a cellar and some vineyard. We are located at the top of Fleury, at the limit of Chirouble, and we own 5.5 hectares. We have some Fleury, Chirouble, Côte de Bruy. That's it.
And two terroirs, la Joie du Palais, Cabernet and Fleury.
Three Cru du Beaujolais and 5 cuvées. We made 3 different cuvées of Fleury, and it's really interesting.
We grow in biodynamic.
We are in biodynamic also, some ores, some ND steam. It's pretty similar to Burgundy, and it's really good gamay.
In very old vine in granite soil in the slope, and with this last detail, we have 25% of wall cluster. and we aging in wood, but not the wood in a big barrel during 14, 15 months. And we have the Cru Beaujolais Fleury, Chirou, with a lot, Cru de Brie with a lot of elegance, very deep, with a good energy, good harmonies. Yes, it's a good project. We are happy.
It's fun,
And it's called Lafarge Vial because your mother is
Vial is the name of my man.
Chantal Vial.
Before I went in, so it's the two names, but it's only family project. No investor.
Okay, and what have you tasted of these old bottles? What have you had that's really good recently?
All bottles?
You tasted on Instagram.
This weekend we opened Pomard, Premier Cru Les Pitures, 1990, because it's my brother vintage. So we opened a Pomard and it was delicious.
Whereas I spend the weekend drinking port on the banks of the River Douro and playing cricket. Good.
Okay.
Any last questions? Otherwise, we will leave you in peace to enjoy your meal.
Yeah.
Well, it's really wonderful to see you all again. Many familiar faces and one or two new ones. And I believe we meet again next week with the wines of Domaine Michel, which will be fun. And we have several more lined up for the weeks ahead. But great to see you again. Thank you to Sébastien, the team at the restaurant.
Thank you.
And thank you to Clothilde and Frederic Lafarge.
Thank you.
Have a great tasting. Enjoy the wine.
Right. See you next week.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.